Thank you for listening to the In the Lead show. Don't forget to subscribe to the show and check out the In the Lead newsletter. Every week, I send out mindfulness and leadership tips to help you become the best leader of you. See the show notes for a link to subscribe to the newsletter, or go to www.intheleadshow.com and subscribe there. Welcome to the show. Welcome back to the In the Lead show. My name is Jennifer Sang, and today I'm joined by Dr. Deb from PTSD and Beyond to talk about how to deal or process difficult situations. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Jennifer. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really excited to have you on to have this conversation. It's something that I think we all need a little bit more right now. A lot of difficulties in the environment and just in the world. And how do we handle that in a more productive way that, is more healing and where people feel more whole? And yeah, I just see so much going on in the world. But before we get started, I would love to know a little bit more about you. So can you tell the listeners who's Dr. Deb?
Yeah, for sure. It's funny because usually when I'm always introduced as Dr. Deb, people would call me in the beginning of my career postdoctorate, Dr. Lind, and it always made me feel really super old. And so I said, yeah, no, don't do that, and then I would just say to people, just call me Deb. And then the feedback was, no, I can't do that. So we had to have some compromise. So Dr. Deb's cool. In the beginning of my career, though, I started off in consulting with leader development, employee opinion surveys. I'm working with psychometrics, anything that was related to human development. And a little bit of a sidebar history of when did I start getting interested in human development. And I have a book from my grandmother that I had from when I was in 7th grade. So I started really tapping into philosophy and exploring the ways of how people interact with one another when I was 13. And so working in consulting for many years, and then of course having my own children, I was working on my doctorate at the time in organization development, which is a combination. I know this sounds, like, oh my gosh, the stats on this, right? The intricate details. It's a combination of philosophy, psychology, sociology, and anthropology. So it looks at cultures, it looks at society, and then also psychology of individuals. And I had a flashback memory when one of my kids was in preschool, which then led me to change my studies to understand trauma and stress. And then I transitioned my career to work from human development on the sense of leader development, but more of a specialized focus on trauma and traumatic stress. And so here I am.
Yeah. And you host the PTSD and Beyond Twitter chat as well as podcasts. So definitely check those out. And yeah, I think that's one of the things that initially drew me to you is I saw that you were talking a lot about PTSD and trauma. And I have also kind of walked a path of exploring trauma and PTSD in my own life, and also just kind of curious, how that impacts others. So yeah, I'm really excited. So how does processing, like when we're going through a difficult situation, what's your thoughts on how that shows up in the body and how that shows up for us as like, in our essence? So meaning everything, our mind, our body, our spirit, like how does, trauma show up in that way when we're trying to process something difficult?
That's a really good question. And I say it's a really good question because while we can look at van der Kolk's and research and also book The Body Keeps a Score, what I have found in practice and doing this work using myself as the guinea pig, that's exactly what I did when I was working on my doctorate, and I changed my study of focus on stress and trauma, is I knew I needed to help myself, and I wanted to then lead as a peer advocate. So more so than just Dr. Deb with the education,
Right.
but also from a perspective of peer led. And so trauma and stress affects the mind, our emotions, our body, our energy, and then also our spirit. I still have a physical ailment from trauma that I live with every day. And it makes me not want to shake people's hands, because it's my my danger warning Will Robinson, which are my hands, and sometimes it can be really super cold. And how we process information from those pillars, if you want to call them, not silos, but they're pillars that we can bucket and label. So the emotions, our mind, our energy, our spirit, and our physical body, they work in unison. And one of those are off kilter and off balance. And I use the word balance in the definition of harmony, because if you think about somebody on a tightrope, right? Just give the illustration for your listeners. If someone's on a tightrope and they're trying to maintain balance, there's always a sense of tension. They're having that movement back and forth, which equates to tension. So it means in order for balance to actually occur, we need to have tension, where in harmony, we coexist with, we coexist and the way we process can affect those different pillars, those buckets. And what I find is, until you start doing the work and we become aware of things maybe that we're unaware of. So I don't know what I don't know until it's actually brought to my awareness, as well as I'm aware that I'm reacting to something. And I would really like to learn how to move from reaction to response to I'm having the memory and the emotional grip, if you will, is removed, and I'm in harmony now with an existing and to me, that's the go beyond piece.
Yeah, and that is so powerful. I refer to that, which what you're talking about is integration. So it's actually interesting. I saw a LinkedIn article earlier today about the inner critic. And a lot of times, people will say like, you just need to silence it, or you need to banish it, or it needs to go like away, push it away, overcome it. And I always think like, just like the inner critic, just like a lot of things, which first of all, I think are rooted in trauma. Second, I think of it as an integration where it's like that harmony that you're talking about. It's not about getting rid of it. It's not about making it go away. It's about how do you live with it and how do you integrate it into all those different pillars so that you can actually use some of the benefits, gifts, and strengths from them. But that only happens when you can move out of that reactive, when we're still really living in that trauma and that's very rooted in us still very deeply. When you get to a point of some healing, I've noticed it kind of, you move naturally into this more responsive, period of, being more holistic and integrated and having that approach. And it's quite a powerful experience. So I fully agree with you that I think it's a holistic approach. And I just, and I like that, you were talking about tension and, that balance and that harmony, because to me, it feels like it is just bringing it all together. And I don't know, for me, it just feels more peaceful too. It's not like I'm trying to battle something, or it's not like I'm trying to resist it. It's just kind of there, and I'm existing with it, and it's a part of me, and it's a part of that wholeness.
I love that. It's part of the wholeness. I like to use cooking analogies. And the reason why is, first of all, I like to cook. But secondly, it's because either people like to eat or people like to cook. And everybody can relate to food. So if we look at some of these elements of trauma, of getting rid of and letting go, and just those two phrases can have a negative response for folks, because oftentimes as trauma warriors, we hear, oh, you need to let that go. When are you going to let that go? When are you going to move on? And it can be from somebody who really has the intention of, wanting to see us heal and grow. When we look at things that are bitter in food, for example, a lemon. So the thing that we need to let go, or that we want to not have a reaction to, right? Those bittersweet things. If we take it in its pure form, it can have the memories, the associations, and we'll equate that to the sourness of a lemon. Now, if we're going to make, say, a vinaigrette, we're going to use the acidic properties of a lemon to give our, salad dressing or vinaigrette that extra little kick. We need just a little bit of it. We don't, use a lot of it, but it works in harmony with all the other ingredients. And we can think about the mind, the body, the emotion, the spirit, our energy self as ingredients, along with our traumatic experiences and memories, and even some things like my hands, for example. If I could figure out one thing I could do for myself yet, because I've had breakthroughs, but for me, this is a big one. That would be wonderful if they could just not be cold all the time or most of the time. Anyway, and so we work in unison and harmony with all these ingredients, and we can whip it up. So, the actual stirring up, if you will, maybe we're in a situation where things are getting stirred up. Yeah. And are we in harmony still, even when things are being stirred up? There are many different, I want to say points on the spectrum, but many moments in life, so many micro moments in life where a person can assess and determine, wow, you know what? I'm in that environment, I'm in that situation, or I'm having that memory again, and I notice that something's different. Yeah. I notice that I'm not reacting. I notice that my body's calm. I'm noticing that I'm able to laugh and think about, I can't believe, I remember that really did bother me. Or maybe with their physical body, they're noticing that they're not having the heart palpitations, or not, being hypervigilant and looking to see who's behind me or where are the exit doors. Everybody has their own micro breakthrough moments. And those breakthrough moments are really an attestament to people who are doing the work to heal and live in that harmonious state. It doesn't happen all the time, believe me. I mean, I want to preface this because there are people, yes, who study Buddhism that are in a harmonious state, so many hours a day. For the most of us, though, we're living in a different kind of way. Yeah. It doesn't mean, though, that we can't achieve that harmonious existence, because we can. We see it from people who are doing it, and it gives us hope and inspiration, not competition, but hope and inspiration that we can also. And I think that's one of the beauty and benefits of peer support, because there are people who will show up to the chats and they talk about stuff. I mean, even on your Twitter spaces, there were people who were speaking so eloquently. And I thought, oh my gosh, that sounds like I want to say it like that.
Right. Yeah. Well, first I have to say, I love that you always use food references, because every time I talk to you, I feel a little bit hungry. Talking about a vinaigrette, last time it was a cookie, but yeah, I mean, I agree. I think, using the little parts of everything that happens to us to bring them together to make something beautiful. And it doesn't mean that just because a lemon is sour, that needs to be thrown out, right? Like you can use it in different ways. And we have the power. I think that has been the biggest breakthrough for me, is there is a self in there that has the power to be able to help bring all of those things together, that it's not just necessarily, am I living in that trauma space or in that one pillar, but can I live in all of them, and can they all work together really well? That's, to me, feels like the ultimate healing. And you're right. It does feel like moment to moment. Some moments you feel very harmonious. There are other moments where you don't feel that way. And I think that's the beauty of life too, is it's always I always say it's like inviting you. It's inviting you to come in and have an experience and kind of take another look at that, because, it's triggering you, or it's, referencing something that happened to you when you were a child or something. There's always a welcoming there that's like, no, come on over. It's still there, and that's okay. And it's always trying to invite you to bring that harmony together. So I love that. So now, thinking about leaders in organizations, let's say, now I notice this a lot, like having difficult conversations or processing something difficult can be really tough. What are your thoughts on how, like in an organizational setting, say I'm a manager and I have like 10 direct reports, and there's a lot going on in the world and it's impacting my employees and it's impacting me. what are some tips you might have for how someone might be able to help themselves, first of all, process what's happening, and then also help maybe others as well?
That's another very good question. One of the things that immediately comes to mind is people can process information separate from the organization culture. And why I say that is because what I've seen, especially right now in the workplace, is that people are either having difficult conversations that have been either shoved under the rug or been postponed. It's like everybody knows, but the conversations never happened. Or people are saying, I don't want to have that conversation with my manager or my boss. I want to have that conversation with somebody else for myself so I can process, so then I can determine where do I want to go? Where do I want to belong? I had a conversation with somebody yesterday. This was a really interesting perspective because I have not, and I preface this that way because their perspective and of what's happening in the workplace with the great resignation is something that I haven't seen. And so what they were saying is that leaders are still very stubborn and holding their ground on changing their ways and not really following that there's this great resignation, right? They're still doing the same old, same old. And they were speaking from experience of, what their practice is. And then I was actually surprised by that because I thought a lot of the things that I've seen, whether it's on LinkedIn or Twitter, there was a fascinating thread yesterday that I just thought, wow, you know what? This is the power of people saying enough is enough. My life is more than my job. My life is more than, being at a desk. Because what I've seen is people having those reflective conversations. The pandemic provided an opportunity of a space
Yeah.
for people to really pause and ask themselves the question, what really matters?
Yeah.
So the reflection has many different layers, and some of them are rooted in that fundamental question of what really matters.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. It was a great space, I think, to reflect and an opportunity, really, I think, to create a more harmonious environment for people. And it kind of disappoints me when I read articles where it's like, these big tech companies are like, you must come back into the office. We need everybody here. That's, the only way we can work. And I just think, man, did we learn anything? Did we?
Yeah,
Did we find that harmony? Because it feels like, and if I have to see another person say, I can't wait to get back to normal, we're getting back to normal. Normal, I don't know, for a lot of people just was not normal, like the way things
right.
were. And I feel like there's almost a lot of um, avoidance or wanting to accept like how bad things really are for a lot of people. And it's almost like when I hear that, it's like, oh, okay, your comfort is more important than my reality or someone else's reality that might be, hey, going into the office is really toxic or traumatizing or very draining for me. And saying that doesn't matter because this is what we want. It really upsets, it kind of bothers me because it feels like, wow, we were given this gift, this space to be able to reflect and do all those things, but I don't know. I mean, was it enough? I
Right.
I don't know. I mean, I think time will tell, but
What
yeah.
I've seen two schools of thought here, which is uh, one group of experiences is that leadership became even more suspicious. You're not here, we can't see you, and so I would classify or categorize leaders and organizations that behave in that way with the suspicion is a deeper level of I don't trust my employees. I don't trust people.
Mhm.
That's one. On the other hand, what I've also seen is we've learned a lot, and the pandemic created us to adjust, to pivot and adjust. And I'll give an example of that. there are organizations that would discredit online learning programs, for example. We're never going to have online learning. We're always going to be in-person learning. And it forced them to look at the online learning model. And some organizations are never going to go back to strictly in person. Now they've got hybrid, they've got all these other things. I know of organizations just that have said, no, we're going to have a hybrid model. Some we're going to completely give employees the option. Do you want to be fully remote? Do you want to, come in a couple days a week? And yet it is surprising that some organizations and some people, some individuals, this hasn't been enough for them to say, I'm going to change.
Yeah.
And what I mean by changing too is to become healthy, to stop the toxicity, to stop the unhealthy work cultures. It hasn't been enough.
It almost feels like they're clinging on to the way things used to be and hoping that it will continue. And it feels like a perfect analogy to what I feel like is going on at a macro level, right? What we're seeing in the environment with the war in Ukraine. It feels like when people feel threatened, it's like they want to hang on to and cling on to every last bit of whatever that was, because there is such a fear of that change, or that maybe even forcing you to really be able to reflect and understand what's going on, like the pain, the suffering, the PTSD, the trauma, all of that. It's easier to just, like the inner critic, oh, I'll just push it aside, banish that. We don't need to think about that, just be positive, right? Or on other extremes, like let's destroy people, right? And countries, because I can't afford to give up what feels really vulnerable to me. So what I'm saying is
people that
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say what I think that's telling me is that for a lot of people, trauma and PTSD and kind of that really deep self-reflection feels unsafe to a lot of people, and maybe is too risky for them to explore and really lean into. That's kind of my sense, is like there are going to be some people who will just never really want to go there because it's just maybe too painful.
Yeah, there's a couple different themes we're talking about here. One is trauma denial.
Mm-hmm.
And that actually can paralyze people. So what I've seen with folks that are in trauma denial is that they'll immerse themselves in their work. They have other coping habits like gambling, alcohol. They're never fully present. They never give their brain, they don't sleep. They might sleep maybe 4 hours. They don't give themselves a moment to pause, because if there is that moment of pausing, then all of the stuff that they are suppressing comes to the surface, and they don't want to address it. They will do whatever it takes to exhaust themselves so they crash and fall asleep, and then they'll wake up. And again, the same cycle starts over again. So that's one thing that we're talking about. One theme is, trauma denial. Something else that we're also talking about is people who have the awareness that this is very difficult and very painful. And they're at what I call a Dorothy moment, where if you remember watching The Wizard of Oz, she's standing there at the crossroads and the scarecrow's talking to her, and she's, saying, well, what am I supposed to do? And he's like, well, you can go this way or you can go this way. So they're in a state of Dorothy. I have a choice to make and I don't know which way to go. So they're frozen, basically. They're having the freeze trauma response.
Yeah.
And hopefully through a safe space of coaching, or a safe space of peer support, or a safe space with any other practitioner provider, can help get some movement going and get some movement going in a safe direction for them. Yeah. And then there's another group of folks that you're talking about hanging on, right? That gripping, hanging on. I'm never going to change. I'm going to fight to the last, my last breath, right? Yeah. But it's not out of honor. It's not out of grace. They're not fighting out of honor or fighting out of grace. It's being fought for control. For control. The fear the fear is the fear of loss of control.
Yeah.
And that is a power over, which is part of the abuse cycle.
Yeah.
So I want to say something about people who have a tendency to hold on because of the power and the control. They're individuals who've lost themselves.
Mhm.
When we're kids, we're curious. We love to play. We love to explore. Kids are fearless. They go running off and it's like, oh my gosh, where did they go? People who have a tendency of an extreme amount of control are people who are extremely fearful, and they've lost a sense of who they are. They have lost their curiosity. They've lost their desire to be joyful.
Mm-hmm.
And those are folks that really need some serious help. But unfortunately, they operate off of the more that I can control, the more that I can, and they'll put fear over you too. If you look at the mechanisms of control, you're going to do whatever it takes to maintain that control. But ultimately, they're people who are destroying themselves because they're in great amount of pain and suffering.
Yeah. Yeah. We see that a lot in narcissism, a wide range of disorders. What that all comes back to me and what that says to me is I don't feel safe. And a lot of times, if you have trauma or abuse, that is a common theme, is that safety was jeopardized or violated or taken away from you at some point in your life. And I feel like you spend the rest of your life trying to control things that you feel safe. And what my therapist always likes to tell me is, she's like, Jen, when you're in that space of wanting to control things or protect something that feels like it's not safe or it's vulnerable, it's not relational. It's completely self-serving. I am here to protect me. I'm here to keep me safe, but it doesn't care about you or anybody else. It just cares about me. But when we can when there's some of that healing and we can kind of shift out of that mindset, it's much more relational, and we can then tap into things like empathy and compassion and all these things we talk about in organizations. But I feel like some of the hard work still needs to be done around doing some of this healing and really removing maybe some of the stigma too around going towards some of these painful things. I know it can be very difficult and very hard, but at the same time, I know just like with everything, you don't, no pain, no gain, right? In some regards, where it's like, yeah, I got to go to these uncomfortable places and feel those things to be able to move forward with it in that integrated, holistic, balanced way that we were talking about. And I just think a lot of people are just scared, because it is scary. I mean, I've done a lot of work and it's very scary. And I think it's one of the most beneficial things we could do for ourselves. But
I agree with that. I agree with that completely. When I was referencing about, the excessive need to control, it was, I want to just clarify, it was on the spectrum of people who are on a healing journey. And sometimes if we're survivors, warriors of narcissistic abuse, if we ask ourselves the question, we do a lot of reflecting. Anybody out there who does reflect, if you do reflection, you're not a narcissist. Because sometimes, you start asking yourself, like, because of gaslighting, for example, wow, am I really, did I really, you start questioning yourself. So I do want to preface that. First of all, and yes, to do the work can be scary. It is scary, and it's scary for many different reasons. I think one of the things for myself anyway, that's given me a smile to be able to say it is scary and smile about it, is because of the amount of breakthroughs. Like every time I'm on a verge of a breakthrough, I feel it, I sense it. And then I'll say to myself, yeah, but you want to know what it means? You've got to go through something scary in order to have the breakthrough. But once the breakthrough happens, it's not scary any longer. Like I used to have such a fear of bees, and insects are part of, the abuse that I survived. And so bees were something that really scared me. And so now I can actually be around bees when they're pollinating and I'm actually looking at a honey hive. Okay. So,
That's
so
awesome.
I mean, I've gone from, you know, serious fear of bees. I still don't like wasps or hornets. Um, I had a wasp in my house, if I can go on a side tangent about fear of things. Nobody was home with me. And I don't know how this thing got in my house. It was dusk. And I thought, what is that on my wall? Like, what is that? And then, of course, I wear glasses and I'm getting closer up to it. I'm like, oh my, and seriously, this thing was about the size of my pinky finger. I was like
Ooh,
sweating
that's a
and
big
going,
one.
oh my, it was huge. Yeah.
Mm.
Minnesota bugs are not
Yep.
tiny,
Mm-hmm.
not as large as, say, the house spiders in England. But anyway, um, yeah, I had to deal with this by myself. And I kept thinking, I've got to do something, because I'm not going to go to bed at night knowing that this thing's around. Where would
Right.
I find it? I got a dog, I've got
Right.
kids. So anyway, the fear,
Yeah.
it's not embrace the suck. It's not embrace the fear. It really is what we're talking about, processing that information.
Yeah.
What's our self-talk like? One of the steps that I take is I acknowledge where I'm at.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm acknowledging where I'm at with this fear. It's very real. How do I want it to be? Well, in my ideal life, I would, grab it, catch it. It wouldn't sting me and I'd bring it back outside. Well, we know
Right.
that's not going to happen. So,
Right. Yeah.
so what's the next best thing? And I'm only 5'2", and it was way up there. It was up on the wall. I'm like, I'm not going to get a ladder.
Right.
Like thinking about what can I do? Right. And you talk it through with yourself. You come up with a
Mhm.
plan. You
Mhm.
reassure yourself.
Yeah.
And then, of course, in business, we have what's called a BAT, now the best alternative to a negotiated agreement.
Mm.
I make these little deals with myself. Okay, Deb. So if you can't get it, what's your BAT? And I'm like, okay, well, my BAT is I'm going to call somebody. That was my BAT. I want to call somebody.
Help.
By the time they drive my house, I'm going to have to follow this thing around, 20-minute
Mhm.
drive just to get to me. Anyway, bottom line is I remembered that I had some, wasp spray. Now this is in my house. And
Wow. Oh,
I kid
God.
you not, that thing was saturated. And I was so proud of myself that I called my kids and said, guess what I did? Guess what I
Yay.
did? I got a wasp. It's in the house. And of
Mm.
course, I had picked it up with the tissue just to show it to the kids, right?
Mhm.
Showing you how big this was, and mom killed it. Do you want to know what my kids noticed though when they came home?
What?
The full can of Raid that was all over the walls and all over the floor, and I didn't care. And yes, I had to get up on a ladder and wash my walls because I didn't know that substance is oil based.
Oh, yes.
But I didn't
Oh,
care because I was
no.
so proud of myself, because
Yeah.
all I looked at was the breakthrough moment.
Yeah.
The
You're so right.
breakthrough moment.
Yeah.
And how we talk
That's
to ourselves and what do we do?
that's what it's all about, those breakthrough moments. Yeah, I can speak from my experience that is very true. I can always sense when it's coming too, because I can sense like, okay, something's happening in my life, a shift that
Yeah.
usually causes some discomfort. And I notice my mood is changing. I'm feeling different. I can't really explain it. I can just feel it. It feels different and it feels almost heavier. But I know that every time that comes up, there's always a breakthrough on the other side
Yep.
coming. That if I can kind of just stay present with that and just keep working, doing the work, that breakthrough is coming. And like you said, the curiosity helps a lot. And what also helps me is I love that you said acknowledging. I was just having a conversation today with my leader saying, hey, like people are telling you one thing, but if you listen to what they're really saying, like what is really happening, which means peeling back all the layers and trying to figure out what that either trauma response is or even PTSD, because that is definitely prevalent. What they're really saying is they want to feel valued. They want to
Yeah.
feel like they matter and like you acknowledge them. Doesn't mean they want you to talk about business and strategy and figure all the stuff out. That's the easy stuff. The
Mm.
hard thing is how can you make them feel valued and seen? Because
Yep.
I feel like in the workplace, especially, a lot of people are craving that, especially after the pandemic and all all the trauma that we've all been through, it feels like that is a very necessary action and
Yep.
response that all leaders can be thinking about is how do I acknowledge where people are and give them that space? And even in that space, to me, there's always a little bit of healing
Yep.
that can occur. And those little breakthroughs can even come from just that simple acknowledgement, right? You acknowledging, hey, there's a wasp in my house. I know that really triggers me. I have fear and trauma around that. Okay, what can I do? But taking that moment to stop and acknowledge it, I think is so critical. And I think we gloss over that a lot in business, especially. It's like, oh, let's just get past that, and let's just go on to all the metrics and the ROI and KPIs and strategy. Like,
Right.
no, we haven't stopped yet to acknowledge what is really there. And I mean, in a lot of times it can be even simple, right? We don't have to make it these big, like events. Cause I have
Right.
a leader who's told me before, like, oh, but I'm not really good at that. Or I've heard like, I'm not a therapist. This isn't my job, but it, I think it's really all of our responsibility as just fellow human beings to be able
Yep.
to help kind of take that moment to really help people acknowledge who they are, what they're feeling, what they're going through. It doesn't take a therapist to do that, but
No,
I
it takes a human being to do it, but not a
yeah,
therapist. I mean, I'm not saying that
exactly.
therapists aren't human beings. I have friends that are
Right.
therapists. Let me preface that. But yeah, excuse
Yeah.
me, it takes a human being. We're
Yeah.
humans.
Yeah.
We're
We're all
emotional
human.
beings. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, if you look at Star Trek, right? Yeah, let's look at Star Trek. Let's go there. We're going to go there. We've got two characters. We have Data, and then we also have Spock, right? Who both are Data. Well, there's one episode in Star Trek where Data actually gets an emotion chip and he can't handle it anymore. He can't handle the overwhelming sensation of emotion, so he has it removed, which is sad for him. And Spock just can't understand, like, okay, what's wrong with you people, right? And like, why
Yeah.
can't you get your stuff together? And what's interesting about leaders who don't have seeds of emotion, they're actually people who need they need to really reflect on why not, because human beings are emotional beings. Like Maya
Yeah.
Angelou said, we might not remember what a person said, but we always remember how they made us feel, which then links back to DEI. And now we've got B. The B part, B as in Bob, is belonging. I can
Yeah.
get invited to the party, but
Yeah.
does anybody talk to me? Do I actually feel welcome? Is
Yep.
that feeling of welcome temporary, or is it like I feel like I just walked into,
Yeah.
a Cheers episode, even though
Yeah.
I'm the new person there,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
I got the invitation, but do I really feel like I belong? Do I
Mhm.
feel like I'm included and I belong? And again, because human beings are emotional beings, we all have the capability to be that leader. We
Yeah.
all have it in us. We
Yeah.
all do. It's a
Yeah.
matter of multiple of things, right? Do we do it? Do we not do it? What's it going to look like for me in the workplace? And I really do challenge leaders, because just because you're in the role doesn't mean you know what you're doing. Anybody can put
Mhm.
together a strategy, but to
Yep.
be a hero in someone's life, that takes
Yeah.
somebody who has empathy, and it takes somebody who has humility, and it has somebody who has their own ego in check, and it takes grace.
And courage, I would say there's a lot of courage that goes in to a lot of this that what we're talking about is even taking that moment to acknowledge, hey, something's happening to me right now and I'm scared or I have this fear. That takes a lot of courage to really stop. The other thing I was going to say was when you're mentioning belonging, I firmly believe that belonging is the root of our human experience. Like we physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually crave that belonging, like at the deepest fundamental level. And I think from what I've observed in the workplace is that is at the root of what most people are asking. Most conflict is, do I belong here? Do you
Yep.
see me? Do you really value who I am? Is
Yep.
this, and at a very, very deep level, like I think we're all kind of craving that and needing that. And there's a
Mm-hmm.
deep need for that belonging piece, which goes beyond just like you said, like, oh, am I invited to the party? Yeah, I can be included. But when I get there, do I feel like I really belong there? Like,
Yep.
and are we telling each other? Are we demonstrating that
Yep.
on a daily basis? Not like once a year or every 6 months do we,
Right.
have a party and tell you you matter and we love you. But no, like it's every day and everything that we do.
Yep.
Yeah, that is such a huge piece, I think, that's missing. We're just scratching the surface, I think, of it. And in the workplace. And yeah, I think it's such a fundamental feeling and need that every single human being has. And you're right. It doesn't take a therapist, doesn't take a coach, doesn't take much for you to just say, hey, you belong here. And let me
Yep.
show you why or how. And I
That's
feel
why I
like
like
that
baseball. That's right.
baseball.
Yeah, it's why I really like base. Well, let me just say right now, I'm not happy with the ML. It's not
Oh,
the
that's
players.
true.
But anyway, that's
Yeah.
another subject. It's why I like baseball. I can go by myself to
Mm.
any stadium because I do. I go,
Mhm.
okay, where am I going to go? What game? What am I going to go watch? And
Yeah.
I've even been to Twins games. I live in the Twin Cities, and I've been to Target Field by myself. And no
Mhm.
matter where I'm at, I can be out doing whatever, and somebody can
Yeah.
have like a LA hat on, and I've got
Yeah.
my Red Sox hat on, and you
Mm.
do the little up thing. I've even had Yankees fans be like, oh, hey, what's up, kind of thing.
Yeah.
What I love about baseball is that there is with the fans the sense of belonging.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
my kids and I, for one of my birthdays, we went down to the Field of Dreams in Iowa where
Oh,
they
yeah.
filmed the
Mhm.
movie.
Yep.
And I mean, there were people from all over the world there,
Yeah.
but talk about that sense of belonging.
Yeah.
I mean, there were people who were like, I don't have any sunscreen. Well, we had sunscreens like here, have the sunscreen bottle, right?
Yeah.
But there were other people who, I mean, looking for shirts that wanted to know. I mean, it's like, how does that fit? I mean, I can think of all these, it was interesting experiences. Like we were cousins or something, you know what I mean? Like, you're asking me about this shirt, how does it fit? I'm thinking, I don't even know you, but we're all together because of baseball. And it's like that movie. It's so true. They don't know why they're coming. They don't know why they're giving you the money, but they have that nostalgic feeling of I belong.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, a lot of sports, I would even argue, I mean, I think even football, I mean, a lot of basketball. I mean, it's very, I mean, it's almost electric.
Rugby.
You can feel it, right? When you're in the presence of it, you can feel that. And again, I think people go to it and crave it because at the, again, fundamental level, I think we all want to feel that way. And then I think, the more that we can develop that in the workplace, and I think that, cultivating that belonging is part of the processing. And, when difficult things come up, a lot of times it's, that belonging is created when you just meet it and you acknowledge it and you say, yeah, I know this is really tough. And I can hear that you're, going through this and this is happening. But just by simply, like you said, acknowledging it, I think that helps in some way people to process it. Cause I think what they're looking for is just for you to validate and see them in some way to go, hey, I know you belong here. It's okay. Like there's no need to be panicked or upset, or I got you. Like you're here. And I think, if we could focus more on cultivating that in workplaces, I think we would see much different, outcomes. We wouldn't see this resignation.
If people felt like they belonged, because what's
Mhm.
happened is there's been so much focus on purpose. Do you believe in the mission and the vision? Okay, well, if I believe in the mission and vision, but I don't feel like I belong, no one's going to stay.
Yeah. Because a belonging, like you said, is something you feel, right? I
Mhm.
always say, I mean, that's what I love about whenever I see these culture like statements or words. I'm like, that's just words on a piece of paper. I'm like, tell me how that is demonstrated and how people are actually feeling that and experiencing that every day. If you
Right.
can't point to that, then all you really got again are words on a piece of paper that don't really mean much.
Right.
And that is one of my biggest gripes with corporate is like, we're very hyper focused on that mission or that culture, but how do we have the accountability to say, no, we need to make this a priority and
Right.
we need to work on this. Anyway, that's so I'm curious, as we're wrapping up the conversation around processing difficult conversations, I would be curious to hear from your experience. What is one of the most difficult situations you've processed? And whatever you want to share, that's fine. But how did you get through it? Or how did you kind of work your way through it? If you're like someone who maybe is starting out, like hasn't done a lot of that processing, what's something maybe they can do based
That's
on
a
your
real
experience?
That's another really good question. And why it's a good question is because we need to meet people with where they're at. So where I'm at might not be where somebody else is at, and somebody else might not be where I'm at, but maybe they're at where I want to be. So I'd like to um, share information in a couple different ways here. When I first started, I would say in my healing journey, it was an exploration of understanding. There were so many things that I didn't understand. And what I found myself doing was researching, so looking for information from reputable sources. And what I mean by reputable sources is if I'm going to read information on a book or on the internet, who is the person who's writing it? Are they a credible source? Like, do they have any background in this? Or, is it an article from somebody who doesn't even have either the education, the experience, they're just writing it. And the other thing that I needed to take in consideration is the possibility that somebody was a ghostwriter, meaning somebody published a book, but maybe they didn't write it. So what I was looking for in the beginning is information that could help me understand. Then what I did was I found specifically a therapist who specialized in narcissistic child abuse. And what I did was I interviewed them. See, what I find sometimes is that when people are looking for providers, whether it's a coach or a therapist, they don't interview. They look at this person's got credentials and they have the experience, and I'm going to go book the appointment.
Yeah.
What I wanted was somebody who was going to resonate with me. Like their communication style was similar, and their practice was, we're going to have a plan, because I need a plan. I don't like where everything is so abstract and airy fairy that I've got no substance to it, because I can't remember goals that way. And I want to make sure that not like it's an assessment metric, but like we've got something. So maybe it's just as simple as, okay, this week we're going to work on processing whatever it would be. Like we're going to work on maybe, processing conversations that you have through email. Okay, that one. So I interviewed people and I just knew it right away. I was like, okay, you're it. We're going to book it.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, so that's one place where somebody can be, the beginning stages, right, if you will. Then there's like a middle of the road kind of thing. Okay, I've done some work. I've worked with some therapists. I've done some self-reflection. And now what I need to do is really be honest with myself and say, what's the stuff that really gets in the way of me being my best self? What's the stuff that really prevents me from moving forward? That's a difficult conversation to have when it's around trauma. There are things that I can tell you I didn't want to think about. See, I made myself a promise. I think I'm laughing about this because I always say, if you can't keep a promise to yourself, who can you keep a promise to? So I have that, I keep myself accountable. And then sometimes I'll reach out to people too that maybe I don't really know very well. And I'll say, can you help me with something? Because what I'm looking for is not the bias and the caring of my friends and family who have my best interest, but it's a bias sometimes, and it can cloud them on when I'm looking for assistance with direction or processing something. So that's why bartenders and hairstylists are so popular when it comes to sharing stuff.
Oh my gosh.
So the middle of the road is the look at yourself in the mirror and say to yourself, okay, what's the stuff that's getting in the way still and preventing me from being my best self? And then the other part of that is what's getting in the way and the stuff that I really want to heal from, that I don't want to share those details with anybody.
Yeah.
You really need to do that kind of self-check. Then the third part is I've done the first part with the knowledge and understanding, and I'm still collecting knowledge and understanding. I'm still doing it. It's not something that just stops, but I'm continuing to understand, seek to understand, and add to my understanding. I've continued to be honest with myself, looking at myself in the mirror and saying, okay, there's still some stuff I'm working on. I'd like to have breakthroughs with these areas. And I want to help others also. So there's this peer component, because what I find is it's the heal thyself and the wounded healer mindset. It's
Yeah.
such a wonderful gift to yourself, right? You've learned how to make bread. You've learned how to bake bread. And that's a gift, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we keep that gift just to us, then people around us starve.
Mm-hmm.
When I can be there to teach somebody else. So I'm not doing the work for them. I'm supporting them. I'm listening to them, validating, sharing my lived experience, still talking about stuff that really bothers me, talking about stuff that doesn't bother me,
Mm-hmm.
celebrating their wins, encouraging them that they can too. There was a conversation that happened recently about encouragement. Oh, you should learn how to just encourage yourself. That is so not true. Think about the person, the coach, who has one person who believes in them, one person who reignites the inner self belief, right? It's not that it's dependent externally, it's reigniting what you already have within you. So when you get to that other phase, then you start helping others along the way with wherever you meet them, where they are at. And then I think that there is an even further beyond piece. And I call that legacy building for even more future generations. I have no idea what that is going to look like when I'm, taking my last breath, but I would like to believe that it was something greater than what I could ever envision. People would say that, at least when I was little anyway, they'd say you're too stubborn. And I don't think so. I think that was perseverance. I think it was persistence as a child, because if I was stubborn, then I would have gotten into trouble, but I didn't. What I did was I stuck to my guns and I knew who I was, no matter what other people were saying or no matter what they were doing. And it's a persistence and a perseverance. And I would like to believe that those two components add to the go beyond of what the future generations are going to look like. But that's what I think. I could be wrong, but I mean, I could be. It's possible.
It's possible.
Not saying that I'm, 100%, but I do believe that there's something more than what we're capable of, for sure.
I agree. One of my favorite authors is Pema Chodron, a Buddhist nun, and she will often say, when people ask, like, what happens when we die, or what happens when you reach enlightenment? She's like, well, here's what I think, but I'm willing to be surprised. I could be wrong, I mean, and I think there's something to that curiosity, but not in a way of like that conviction where it's like, I have to be right, or it needs to be a certain way. Cause again, we're going back into control, but just that open curiosity and that perseverance, like you said, I think is so key, because I think that's part of like the childhood experience that a lot of us lose along the way, I think. And, can be, maybe as a result of somebody else's trauma, they can, misinterpret that, or maybe use it as a way to shame people. But I think that there is definitely a very deep, child sense in that, where it's like that curiosity and perseverance and just being open and so curious that you just keep going. No, that's all very beautiful. I love it. And I agree. I mean, I think from a healing perspective, at least in my journey, it has been a complete inside out approach. It's about going to myself first and doing a lot of that work and that processing. And then eventually, like you said, being able to share that with others, share the bread with others, and help them process. So one of the things I know I'm very passionate about is dedicating myself to kind of healing myself, like you said, so that then I can help others heal themselves as well, and just
Yep.
be that space for them. And it's such a powerful place to be in. But I love all of your tips. For me, I agree. I think you need to interview your therapist. I've come across a few that just didn't. It's almost like fit, like trying on clothes, right? Like it doesn't always fit quite right. You need to find someone that fits you well, and that I stole that from a mentor once. She was saying, "Oh,
I
yeah, it's like
love
trying
that
on clothes."
analogy. I think
Yeah.
I'll cite you, but I'm gonna borrow it.
No, it's
I love
great. I
it.
mean, because it's like, yeah, that's what it's about. You can meet, it's almost like relationships or anything, right? Like it's about that vibe. And I think it comes back to that safety component for me. And can they hold that space where I do feel like I belong, even if I bring all the stuff with me, right? All the baggage, like, do I feel safe enough, and do they make me feel like I belong there? And
Yep.
that's where the processing and healing really happens. So yeah, definitely find someone who's right for you. I think I told you before that one of the first therapists I ever saw was a somatic therapist. And it was just such a wild experience for me, because I had no experience with like somatics, but she came highly recommended from a friend and was great. We worked together for a long time, but that for me worked, where maybe some of the like cognitive behavioral, like more traditional type therapy didn't work as well. For
Yep.
me, the clothes that fit were like the somatic work,
Me
or
too.
some of the
Yeah.
more like maybe spiritual even work.
Mm.
Definitely a lot of that influence as well. But yeah, find what works for you, and just, you know, just practice that discomfort, practice acknowledging, practice, just being there for you. And yeah, that's always worked for me as well. Um, Thank you so much today, Dr. Deb. This was such a fun experience, and having this conversation around how we can process difficult situations. Where can people find you on the web and out in the world?
Well, thanks for having me on too. I really appreciate our
Yeah,
conversation. I know that we've talked a few times before, and I've always enjoyed our conversation. So thank
same.
you to the audience for still being here with us. If you've made it
Mhm.
this far, hey, you know what? Shout out to you.
Yeah.
Where people can find me, people can find me a few different ways. One is my website, which is Dr. Deb, and then Lind is LINDH.com. They can also find me on Twitter, which is at Deborah Lind. I'm also on Instagram at Dr. Deborah Lind. And if they want to shoot me out an email, it's hello@ptsdandbeyond.org.
That's
And the
awesome.
other thing is too, if you do connect with me, please let me know that you heard me on Jen's show. That would be fantastic. So then I can say, hey, guess what? People, your audience connected, and always
Yeah,
nice to share that feedback.
that is awesome. Thank you. Yeah. And don't forget to check out PTSD and Beyond on Twitter every, what is it, Monday at 5 o'clock Pacific?
Yep, Monday
Eight-
night at 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, and use the hashtag PTSD and beyond. And then also the podcast. I just can't believe in the last 3 days, like listenership went up by 120%. I was like,
Wow.
what's going on? I think it's
That's
great.
cool.
But
That
I
is
know
great.
it's like, okay. And we're just like here, we're a small indie podcast. So it's great.
Mhm.
So we both have, messages that are resonating with people. And we're on all the different, podcast listener sites, indie, and then also the big major ones, but that's also PTSD and Beyond.
I highly recommend it. It's a good podcast. I like
And
it.
Jen's on there too, so you got to go listen to her
Yes.
episode.
Yeah,
So
that's
yeah,
true. I
see,
did.
we're doing a lot of supporting one another, which
Yeah,
is what it's all about.
always. Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.